I just want to welcome everyone to Psyching Students Up for Success, the Psychology of Motivation and Performance and Employee Learning Week. I just want to mention really quick that for the second consecutive year, OCC is participating in National Employee Learning Week. And yes, it's a real thing. And OCC chose to participate to inspire ongoing learning for all of our employees. And this actually marks our final live session. Before I introduce our presenter, I do want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. Joining us today is Dr. Heather Davis, and I'm going to read her bio. She is the Director of Student Assessment in the Geffen School of Medicine, where she is responsible for the management of valid, reliable, equitable assessment program used to enhance learning and verified competency of undergraduate medical students at UCLA. She spent more than 20 years in leadership positions at UCLA Center for Pre-Hospital Care. She holds a doctorate in educational psychology from the University of Southern California, where she also teaches as an adjunct professor in the Rossier School of Education, and is a board chair for the National Licensing Board for Paramedics. Dr. Davis is a published author and national speaker. I am so delighted that you're joining us at Orange Coast College, even if it's, virtually. I am going to turn my camera off and we'll be here to help moderate the chat. The floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm going to begin sharing. This is my version in my mind of what it looks like for student success. And then I have some opening remarks here, and then we'll get started. Let me organize my buttons too, so I can see if you're trying to say anything in the chat. I did want to let you know that I prepared a resource document for you so that you don't feel like you have to try to write everything down. All of the implementation strategies that I'm sharing today, I've made a bulleted list of those and I've sent them to Claudia, so she'll be sharing those with you. She'll probably email them to you and post them somewhere. And then I've also provided a list of references of what I think are the sort of the must-have articles or the easiest to read short books that if you wanted to read more about any of these topics, you could and actually get through. Not the kind that like you buy and intend to read, but then you never really get to them, because I have a stack of those on the end of this desk. But ones that you could really get through. So I provided those to Claudia and she'll share them with you. So one of the things that we know is that you can't read and listen at the same time. So if you're trying to write and listen, chances are you'll miss one or the other of what we're talking about today. So feel free to just sort of listen and think about how could I use this information, or how does it apply to what I'm teaching, who I supervise. And sometimes this is like, how does this apply to my own kids that I parent? So I'm hoping that there will be something for everyone here. We really debated on which background I should use. I had a UCLA background up when I came on, and Claudia made a frowny face, so I switched to the USC one, and then I decided to go with the Grand Canyon. We're a divided household. My primary gig is at UCLA, but I'm fortunate enough to be asked back to teach at USC, and I really love the work that I do there with students still in the doctoral program at USC. I became interested in how we process information when I was watching the firefighters that we train, most of the firefighters in Southern California who become paramedics do so through UCLA. They come to UCLA's School of Medicine to get their paramedic training. And I was watching many of them sort of ruin their lives coming through training. It was such a condensed, intensive program that many would fall asleep on the way home, put their car in the ditch. One of them hit a fire hydrant. Can you imagine being a firefighter and hitting a fire hydrant? Terrible. It was just really ruining sort of their lives. And I thought there has to be a better way to teach this information. So that's really how I got interested in how do we learn and motivate people? How do we retain information so that we can use that information in crisis, right? There's no bigger crisis than 911 or the emergency department. And that's sort of how I got interested in this information I'm sharing with you about 10 years ago. The information I'm sharing today probably is not new to many of you. You've probably had in your original teacher preparation or your higher ed classes or some professional development, you may have heard it along the way. But as a colleague once said, to me, don't change the words to the song. When you hear a song on the radio, you can't sing to it the first time. You can't sing along to the words the first time. You have to hear it a couple of times when you're driving down the road. And it's the third or fourth or fifth time that you hear it that you start to pick up the tune. And so, on purpose, I'm revisiting some things that maybe you got too busy to use. You learned about, but then you moved on, or you took over somebody's course and you meant to revisit your strategies, but then we got busy and COVID hit and you were going to go back and say, is what I'm doing still working for these students? But then we're just busy and we haven't had a chance to do that. So on purpose, I've not changed the words to the song, and I'm hoping that by hearing it again today or looking at it through a different lens, the information may be more accessible to you today than it was at one point. If there's one researcher who I absolutely love the work of, it's Dr. Richard Mayer. And if there's one book I feel like every educator should have on their desk, it's his Applying the Science of Learning. I'm bringing it closer to you. Do you see how skinny this book is? Super usable. I get no royalties from his book. I just love Dr. Mayer. He's a little nugget of a man. You could carry him on your hip. He's super sweet. He's at UC Santa Barbara, but what he is a researcher. He has his own lab and he takes all these theories that I'm sharing with you today and he says, yeah, but do they really work on humans? Is this really how the brain works to process information? And in real context with college students, with adults, is this, how do we make this work so that people can use this information? And then he lays it out for you. And each one of these theories is in a double page spread. That's it, 2 pages on how do I use this information in my classroom. So love it. It's super usable. And so I really love his Applying the Science of Learning. And I've referenced, yay, yeah, Claudia has it too. That's because we use it in our program at USC, but I really love him. And so if you're just like at the end of this, if you're like, okay, I need one thing that I can read or reference, that's the one that I would recommend. And I do have it in the little handout that I prepared for you. So all good educators would say, what are the objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? I would say at the end of today, at the end of our time together, it would be, what should I start doing to improve motivation in my classroom, make sure that students are set up for success and that they want to come and that they can continue learning and are maximizing their learning. What should I start doing that I wasn't doing before? And am I inadvertently doing any things that are destroying motivation? Oopsie. So I'm going to help you recognize those because there might just be some things that you didn't know are destroyers of motivation. And if you're doing any of those, stop. So we'll identify those. And then in particular for our underrepresented students, for minority students, are there any things that we have learned from our historically Black colleges and universities that they're doing very well that we can adopt into our practice in our regular colleges and universities? In our community colleges that serve these populations and say, what have we learned that we need to start doing that will help these students succeed? I'll share those with you today. And there's some really great stuff that's super easy to do that we maybe just don't pay enough attention to. That's the goal. Those 3 things. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? And is there anything specific to particular populations? Okay, so the motivational constructs, the whole thing was motivating students for success. There's 3 motivational constructs that we think of in educational psychology, and that is, do people choose to do an activity? Will they persist when it gets hard? And are they investing enough mental effort to get through it? So that's what we want to know. So whenever somebody comes to you, like if a student did poorly on a quiz or some sort of assessment, and they said, oh yeah, I just didn't study. It was my brother's 21st birthday last night, and we all had to go out and celebrate. That's an active choice issue. Now, I'm not upset about it. I'm not mad about it. And I don't think that we need a giant study plan to fix it. It was an active choice issue. It was the 21st birthday. It's probably not going to happen again. He's not going to have another 21st birthday. He chose to go do this family thing. That's fine. That's an active choice issue. And we just need to move on with our lives. Next time he needs to choose to study, and it will probably resolve this issue. In contrast, we're trying to solve a problem of this failed quizzes, and the student says, no, I studied for 2 hours. I had everything out. I was at my desk. I studied for a long time. But it might just look like they were studying. They had the computer out, but they also had their phone out, and they had the Snapchats going, and they had the TV on in the background, and the little brother is coming in, and the PlayStation's going on over there. That might look like we're studying, but we don't have control of the physical and social environment, and we're not investing enough mental effort. So in this case, they actively chose to engage in the activity, but are not investing enough mental effort. And so that's the way that I would be coaching the student. That principle of motivation is kind of being violated here. I teach these principles to students, and they come to me and will sort of say, okay, so was this an active choice issue? Was this a mental effort issue? And we start to have them be able to say, oh, I think maybe it just looked like I was studying and I wasn't really studying. I wasn't really investing enough mental effort. The last is about persistence. And this is where you've heard a lot, you've probably read a lot about, will people continue to work hard when when it gets difficult? And this is one of the, how do we help students when it gets hard, so that they don't just close the computer screen or close the book. And so when tasks are challenging, and you know they're going to be challenging, something you can do is allow people to work in groups until they start to get the hang of it. And then once you can see that people are starting to get it, then you can assign more independent tasks later. So actually allow group work in the beginning, especially if you are doing breakout rooms in Zoom, or once we go back to regular classwork, then allowing them to start in class, actually start the homework in class, or in a flipped classroom model, do the homework in class and record your lecture and have them watch the lecture actually at home, do the work in class, so that you can actually be going around and checking on their progress and identifying who's having trouble. So there's comfort, there's that sort of sense of like, I have a competent role model to help me, so they help drag somebody along kicking and screaming. But students are more likely to persist when they have a near peer who is helping them, even more so than one of us as faculty helping them. More likely to persist when they're allowed to work in groups when the task is difficult. Also, sometimes you can, like I said, you have them get started before you go separate. What you don't want to do is just assign something and then have them get home, open it up, and then it's like, the other thing is to provide worked examples that have the rationale. So a worked example, the problems are there, every single step with the rationale is provided, so that when they get home and there's been now a few hours in between, or they finish the Zoom session, but they're not going to do the homework right now because they're going straight to another Zoom session, or they're watching their little brother, or they're going to work, then it's now a couple days before they go to do that homework and they've forgotten how to do it. They can open up that worked example and go back and refresh their memory on each step. You also, I just heard somebody say, I think it was Claudia who said, I recorded a little screencast explaining how I did it. So they can just watch a little 3-minute video of you explaining it again. So they don't need to watch the entire Zoom session again, just that little piece to get started. That's what you're trying to do, is get started. Sometimes cleaning your house, the hardest part, cleaning out the garage, the attic, hardest part, getting started. And so if you just get the little oomph, something to get them started, that helps with the persistence. Okay. So next is really important ideas about our job as teachers, as managers, as supervisors is managing cognitive load. And this is a real challenge right now in this time when we're all on Zoom. So I think of cognitive load as how many slots we have available for processing new information or any information. So we're talking about our working memory. I'm not so much going to talk about our sensory memory, or what some people refer to as short-term memory. And I'm not really talking about our long-term memory yet. So this is just the part that is like, how do I even hope to get it into long-term memory? Just the working memory. So if you ever watch Price is Right, you might be familiar with the Plinko game. So anybody know Plinko? Patricia, Martha? No. Thank you, Arabian, for playing. Okay. And thank you guys who have your cameras on. So I'm getting, thank you, Sean. I'm getting any kind of feedback. I appreciate it. Richard, okay. People know Plinko. So you drop the puck at the top and it starts to go down. And it's going to find one of those little slots and then drop, and you win the points for that prize. So we have a limited number of those slots. And I don't know if back in, your original like high school or college psychology class, anybody ever told you that we could remember about 7 things. And sometimes we were told, oh, that's my phone numbers are 7 digits long. And you may have even heard, like you may have even experienced that once you add prefix, once you add the area code, you start losing the last 4 digits. And so a lot of people believe that we could remember about 7 things. Well, that work was originally done by Miller in the 1950s. And I don't know if we're getting dumber or if technology is messing it up, but that it turns out that that's not really true anymore. We really only can manage about 3 to 5 things. We have about 3 to 5 slots. And so that work was repeated in the 90s by Sweller. And we only have about 3 to 5 slots. So our job is to manage all of the extra stuff that's going on. Well, in your classroom, that's like, that's maybe you can do it in your classroom, but how do you manage all the extra stuff that's going on in people's households right now, right? They have kids running around, they have siblings running around. When Claudia was doing the introduction, I just realized my neighbor is playing pop music super loud, and it was going to come on the recording. So I had to turn my camera off and go close all the windows, right? You can't control some of this stuff. And so, but again, if you can hear the music, it's taking up one of your slots. If you're hungry, it's taking up one of your slots. If somebody is jiggling the table and that drives you crazy, it's taking up one of your slots. My voice, taking up one of your slots. The slides, taking up one of your slots. If you're trying to take notes, it's taking up one of your slots. You're out of slots, right? So the really key piece here is for our students who come with challenges, 3 of their slots might be taken up before they ever got logged in this morning. And so what's available to work with the information you're trying to share with them? So this makes it incumbent upon us to really make the information we're presenting very clear and to make sure our materials are incredibly clear. And so again, that Mayor resource is really helpful in making this really simple to understand. So one of them is to use what we call both spatial and temporal contiguity. If you're using diagrams, put the labels right on top of the diagram. So in your slides, your handouts, any materials you provide, put the label right on top of the picture, like you see in the upper left. When you do something that's on, like you see on the image on the lower right, your brain has to keep switching. That's called when you divide your attention that way, and your brain never really attaches the label to the information, and you never attach those in your brain. So you want to put the words right on top of the image. So frontal lobe, literally label that frontal lobe. And same with the rest of those images. So anything that you might be labeling on your handout or on your slide, put the words right on top of wherever that image goes. And our brains do remember pictures better than words. So any opportunity you have to use an image, choose the image over the words. It is better if students can annotate right on the slide. So if they have two screens, like a tablet, and they can watch the Zoom, so if they can annotate on the tablet and watch via Zoom, that's amazing. But some of our students are struggling to have one screen and computer access, so that might not be a possibility. In that case, then think about, could you get your slides uploaded ahead of time so they can get them downloaded onto something so that they can have them at the ready? Could they at least digest them ahead of time? Could you get them downloaded? I know we're terrible. A lot of us like to be working on our slides till the night before or 1 hour before class. But okay, so if you want to still mess with your slides, could you then provide a handout that has the bulleted notes for students so they're not trying to write down everything? You have to think again about, if your students have a limited number of slots to process information, what's most important. And so you have to make the information as clear as possible. When you first look at a slide like this, you're like, oh, okay, they've tried to make it pretty here. We've got an image in the background, one in the foreground. But when you use it from when you look at that slide from the lens of cognitive load, it's a disaster. Look at how many different colors we have, types of font and style. We've got italics, we've got bold, we've got colors. We've got this image in the background. We've got the little driver pulled out. Total mess in terms of cognitive load, unnecessary. Keep it simple and signal to students what is important. So as something like this, much clearer, much more simple. We've labeled what it is. We've shown in very simple way what's important about this image and what we want them to see. So signal to students what's so important. I'm making a note here. In terms of cognitive load, it actually increases cognitive load to have the little logo in the bottom of every slide. So if it's not required by your college or whoever you're doing a presentation for, you should actually just remove those. Sometimes it's required by your institution to have all your slides labeled, but if it's not, you should get rid of that. Every time your brain sees that, it has to decide whether that's useful information or not. And so it just takes up one of your slots, and then it's clearly a waste because that's not necessary to show up on every single slide. Okay, so keep it simple in terms of your delivery and signal to students what's important, because they only have 3 to 5 slots. We don't have a whole Plinko board, just 3 to 5 slots, and you have to help them see what's most important. So also good to know is that the way that we process language, we can't read and listen at the same time, and they can't write and listen at the same time. So because you're probably delivering slide information like I am today, very important that you don't have full text slides. They really should be mostly an image that illustrates what you're talking about. And there should be so few words that they pretty much can read them instantly. And if you do have to have a slide there that has a lot of text, then what you'll want to do is put the slide up and shut up. Good luck. I know, as teachers, really hard. I don't know what's wrong with us. We can't stop. We can't stop talking. This is really hard. So if you do need the students to take notes on the slide, you'll need to click the slide, let them write it down. And then when all their little heads come up, then you can start explaining what's on the slide and what you wanted them to know about that information. But very important that you don't read the slide. That's called redundancy, and it actually will worsen their retention. So this is really important to know with captioning right now, because one of the ADA compliance requirements is that slides be captioned for particular audiences. But if you're not hearing impaired, you should actually hide the captioning or turn off the audio. Because redundancy, when we are reading the same thing we're hearing, it actually gets gummed up in the way that we process language. And so students should know to turn one or the other off. Either hide the text and listen, or or turn the audio off if you can't hide the text and just read the subtitles. So, but it's really important for you to know not to read the slide. So just use the image and then tell them what you wanted them to hear, but don't put the same words on the slide that you're going to say. So these are so important in terms of the way that we construct the delivery of our information. And why are these related to motivation? Because if a student is working really hard, furiously hard to copy down everything on the slide and then can't remember any of it, don't you think that's demotivating? They feel like they're working very hard and then can't remember any of it, and they believe that's their fault. It's not their fault. It's your fault. I'm, of course, playing a little bit. I'm being a little bit mean, but it is in the design of our materials, and we can help them learn better. But it is absolutely not a achievement issue. It's not how smart the student is. This is the way that we learn and process information. And it doesn't have anything to do with the student's ability. So if we just design materials and took that into account, the student wouldn't feel dumb or feel inferior because they couldn't do something that our brains are not set up to do, any of our brains set up to do. We have to think about the way that we design materials and deliver information so that they can succeed and feel efficacious in the way that they process that information and then demonstrate to you that they got it. So our job as the educator, as the administrator, as the folks that work in student success is to help manage how much is coming over the top of the cup so that they feel like I got it and I can, the cup doesn't flow over. One of the ways to do that, if you know that you have a really intense session coming up, is some pre-training. Do some of it ahead of time in bite-sized chunks. Is there something you can assign for them to watch before class, to do before class? Is there a worksheet? Is there some piece of it that they could complete before class? That might be helpful so that they're ready. Is it just vocabulary so that when you're speaking, they're not thinking, I don't know what that is. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what he means by that. So that they had the language of what you speak. So I teach mostly medical stuff. So we have them take a medical terminology class that's self-paced, tutorial they can do, and it's set up based on the body systems. They work through that at their own pace before they come to class, before they enter the program, so that we're speaking the same language and they're not trying to look up words as I'm delivering content. So that's an example of pre-training. Again, all trying to manage the number of, work with the fact that we only have 3 to 5 slots available for processing new information in our working memory at any one time. And you can't control what's happening at home. So if this learner is hungry, this learner is exhausted, if they're hypoglycemic, if they're sick, if their little one is tugging on their leg, if they've got a toddler in their lap that they're shifting while they're trying to listen to you, all of those things are taking up slots. So how many are left? You have to make sure that what you're delivering is as easy as possible in terms of digesting and not taking up too many slots. Arabian, you unmuted. Did you want to ask a question there or comment?
No, I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, okay. So the scaffolding obviously provides support and structure. That's one of the reasons that you put a scaffolding outside a building that you're working on. And our job then, as we manage content, is to provide that scaffolding in the beginning, more support in the beginning, much like a little one trying to learn to ride a bike. At first, it was, a big wheels. And then it might have been a tricycle with a little more height and less big wheels. And then we, of course, hold the seat. And then we're nearby, but maybe less holding, right? We remove some of that scaffolding. This is also important for our underrepresented students to remove the supports and make sure that you keep communicating that you believe they can do it. And as we talk about efficacy, you remind them of ways in which you are sure they can do it, that you have seen them do the building block pieces of what we're about to attempt to do or what they're about to do. So that's one of the ways that we build efficacy is through mastery. And maybe they've not done this exact thing that we're working on or trying to get them to do, but they've done pieces of it or something similar. And it's sometimes hard in the moment for learners to remember or feel like I can do this, but you go a long way, or their group. And if you have a large class, if you're teaching 100 students, perhaps you can't be that source of reminder for everyone, but then TAs or working in groups, their group can remind them, you got this. Remember, we did this a couple weeks ago. Or you build assignments in parts that lead up to it so that when you put all those pieces together, they have a successful outcome. So you purposely build in those scaffolds so that they indeed can be successful. So much of what's happening around this motivation comes from what we know from social learning, sociocultural theory, or social cognitive theory. And there's one of the pieces that I had already mentioned was providing guided practice. And that means leaving class time to actually practice the skills that we're teaching or application of the knowledge that you're teaching. So often when you and I were learners, we learned new information in class and then went home and practiced it. That was called homework. We went home and practiced it. The problem that we're discovering now, and particularly two things, for underrepresented students who may have more commitments than others outside of the classroom based on socioeconomic status, based on culture, how many people are in the household, need to work. There's the ability to just do work outside of the classroom, maybe less. But also the important other piece here is that there's no help. So they struggle and go back to active choice, mental effort, persistence. When they get stuck, there's nobody to help. So you want them to practice in class so that A, you can see who needs help, and B, they either have near peers, competent others in class who already got this, or you to be able to provide some support. And so we set up activities. So what they're doing here is an MCI drill, a mass casualty incident drill. It's a tabletop drill that they're practicing. And we're doing it literally with little tiny matchbox cars in a mock city. So they get to practice all of the roles before they are in internship with real radios and large vehicles over several city blocks, trying to, manage for real and then on an actual incident. So they get practice and then feedback and an opportunity to correct and do what we call rapid cycle practice. Feedback is an important component of motivation for people you supervise, for your children, and for learners. Knowing how they do. And it's particularly important for this generation that are in the workforce right now. For our millennial workers, they really thrive on feedback. They want to know how they're doing. Remember, this is the group that got a lot of positive reinforcement at home. And so Martha's nodding her head. And so they need a lot of feedback. Even if it's not always positive, they do want to know how they're doing and how they can improve. And particularly if they're doing well, they want credit for the things that they're doing well. So specific feedback means that people can practice when you're not there. So you needs to be behavior based and avoid platitudes like, great job, keep up the good work, nice what you're doing there. And my analysis, what I do is work in valid assessment. And my analysis of our feedback of our medical students is that most narrative feedback, meaning what we document, is on average 8 words long. So can you imagine, overwhelmingly positive and 8 words in length, which means mostly we write things like, keep up the good work, great team member, nice to have on service. Not helpful at all. We need to provide specific feedback that does complement anything that a student is doing well, focuses on the strategies or techniques you taught them rather than their actual outcome, and does, in order to build mastery orientation, does focus on something they could work on to get even better. Even a high performer wants to know, how can I get even better? And that practice. And if you have people that are working around you, with you, other professionals, that's something that we all can continue to practice. But deliberate practice means we're working on something specifically. So you have to give specific feedback if you're going to do deliberate practice. So students have to know, what am I working on to get better, which means somebody had to have given them specific feedback. And specific feedback is not that easy. It's pretty uncomfortable. And so most people don't actually engage in very specific, deliberate practice. This is the work of Anders Ericsson, and I don't know if you realize he died this year. Anders Ericsson died this year. So he was his latest book was Peak, and he's the 10,000 hours guy. Malcolm Gladwell made that famous, or made that sort of popular, but Anders Ericsson was the man who did all of the research behind the 10,000 hours for becoming an expert. And so he sort of figured out how do we get better? How do expert golfers and chess players and musicians get better? And it is getting specific enough feedback from a coach or a teacher in order to work on that thing specifically and practice deliberately until I get better at that component part, and then I can move on to the next thing. If we think about that, how rewarding that is from a motivational perspective. If I'm working on 100 different things and I get 1% better at each of them, I actually remain pretty flat. But if I work on one thing until I get much better, you can see a big change in my performance. Then I work on the next thing, another big change. And those peaks are exciting and they motivate me to keep going. And so that's why athletes and people do very hard work and continue at it, because it feels good to get better at something. It's also why, as an adult, you do things that are hard and you're not very good at, and you keep showing up and you do more of it. I train and compete in jiu-jitsu, and there's a reason I keep showing up and getting smashed by giant men, and show up the next day and do it again. And as people go, why do you do that? Why do you roll around on a mat with sweaty grown men? And I'm like, I don't know. There's something about getting better at something. But I'm driving in my car and thinking about it and going, that's how he got me. Tomorrow I'm gonna fix that. And I keep showing up and I keep getting better. That sort of mental chess game is really interesting. Yes, growth mindset. Yes, very much. I thought you were going to say gross mindset. With the sweaty boy part. Okay, very important here as we talk about motivational construct, that students feel like we're in it together, that this is a social partnership. Never, never, ever should students feel like it's us against them, that it's the administration against them or the faculty against them or you as a teacher against them. The reason I'm using this photo in particular is Stan is the instructor here, and you see he's down on his knees. That's standing in the corner with a clipboard going, you're doing that wrong. Stan is a retired captain now. He was 30 years in the fire service as a paramedic and a coordinator. This man is volunteering his time. He's down on his knees. He's showing these young men how to do these skills, these airway management skills. But not only that, he's telling them the social construct of how to get into the fire service, what it's going to take to be successful. He does a lot of coaching and mentoring, because there's the rest of this is what also we know about underrepresented students, is that belonging is very important. Do I fit here? Is there a place for me here? Because there's a lot of self-doubt and self-questioning. And so there's a lot of reinforcement, and there has to be somebody coming along to say, yes, you are enough. Yes, you are good enough and you fit here. And let me help you make it easy for you to see that. And let me show you how to make that happen. So focusing on strategies, not just the outcome, and providing practice and coaching so that when the moment comes, they're ready. Don't let people circle the drain. Not only do we offer a helping hand, but also what we know about students who often need the most support is that they often will not ask for it. So you will say, just let me know if I can help you, and they never come. The people who come are the high performers who don't need your help, right? The students who are already doing very well. Those are the ones who sign up for office hours. Those are the ones who want to talk about how to go from an A- to an A, or who are already getting a 96 and want to know how to get 100%. It's the students who are really struggling, and because those are a lot of feelings of self-doubt, so questions about their self-worth. They say things like, I don't want to bother you, I don't want to take up your time, I'll figure it out. No, ma'am, it's okay, I'll figure it out. No, that's okay. So instead, I have to say things like, that's what I'm here for, this is my job, I want to help you. But on the other hand, I don't want to be right nipping at their heels either. But I find that I do have to come to them. And these are often my minority students and my veteran students. There's a block about asking for help. And so we want to make ourselves very accessible, or design in practices that sort of force the remediation without singling out students. So let me give you an example of how we might do that. We have again, a mastery orientation that says any knowledge gap we have, we want to close the gap. So when we take an exam, we get a remediation prescription. Just the software that we use gives us a bulleted list of the concepts, not the questions, but the concepts the students missed. Every student is required to complete answer the question or fill in what did you miss. And then if you turn those in, you can recoup half your points back. So you get half credit back for those. So I'm sort of forcing the remediation. I want you to close the gap. And whether you miss 2 questions or 20 questions, everybody fills in their remediation prescription to say, no matter how big the gap, a patient is going to be affected by what you don't know. It's important. So everybody fills in the gap, and you get rewarded by doing so by getting half the points back. Now you can't get full credit, because you can earn more points than the person who knew it the day we took the test. But there is a reward for looking up the information and knowing it after the fact. There are other folks who do things like, for example, making a test a take-home test and saying, I don't care if students look up the answer. If they look up every single answer, there's learning in that. They're looking up every single test. Every single answer. And they're probably spending more time looking up all the right answers than if I just had them take the test in 20 minutes the next morning. And so that's the philosophy too. But the idea here is that you might have to build into your course ways to remediate everybody, rather than hope that the students who need your help will come get help. Another way to do this is purposely scaffold assignments so that there's early opportunities for success, so that people can see that they are capable and they build confidence and efficacy, and allow revisions. Very important motivationally. If a student tanks an assignment early in the semester, they often will feel defeated and like, why bother? The best I can get in this class is a D now. Why should I even try? So we want to make sure that early assignments either don't weigh very much in their grading total percentage, or that they have an opportunity to revise and get a better score. So revisions are encouraged. And if you're doing quizzes or formative assessments, it is a good idea to review those. I know some professors don't, because they don't want their items out there, but that's a learning and educational event. You don't have to put the item up on the screen, but reviewing the concepts, again, closes the gap for everybody in class so that we can move forward, making sure that everybody has the right information. If we think of them as formative, as an educational event, rather than just an assessment, so an assessment for learning rather than just of learning, then quizzes become very helpful to build confidence and efficacy. Importantly, we want to make sure that we're in what we call the zone of proximal development, that what we're asking students to do is close to what they are capable of doing with the right scaffolding, with the right supports. And that's because if you ask people to do things that are way too easy, they won't even try because it's too easy. Like, why should I bother? That's not worth my time. And if you ask people to do things that are way too hard, they also won't try because it feels like you're trying to embarrass them or there's no way they can be successful. So if you want my best performance, you have to put me against somebody. You have to give me a task that I can possibly do. Or if we were talking about competition and you wanted my fastest run time, you would put me next to somebody who's pretty close to my skill level. You don't have me go against somebody who, like a fifth grader, because I probably could outrun them, let's hope. But you also don't have me go against Usain Bolt because I probably wouldn't even try, right? You have somebody that's close to my skill level. So make sure that we have the appropriate level of challenge. You don't dump somebody in the deep end. You use floaties, appropriate scaffolding to make sure that you don't drown people in the deep end. And it also is very important not to lower the bar. The message you send as the competent other is really important. You want people to know that you think they can do it, that you expect success, that you believe they can get there, that everybody can get over the bar, and there's a lot we can do to help them get over the bar. No, we're not going to lower the bar, but there's a lot we can do. We can move a deadline. We can get extra help. We can divide assignments into smaller chunks. There might be other ways we can demonstrate competency. So we don't change the standard, but you might be able to change a deadline or change a consequence. So for example, recently, as the director of assessment, the question came to me, could we lower the passing standard for our clerkship exams in third year of medical school? No, we cannot. However, we perhaps can change the consequence because right now, if you fail those exams, you go on academic probation. If you go on probation, that affects your ability to match or go to a residency program. Well, so that's an arbitrary consequence that you go on probation. And by the way, in the way that students use their veteran benefits, if you go on probation, your benefits stop until you're off probation. And many places, that's the end of the semester. That isn't until the next rating period. So in my previous position, we stopped using the term probation. We changed the consequence. Now you meet with the program director and you get a letter, a formal documentation of your current situation. We're concerned about your academic performance, but we stopped putting them on probation and calling it probation because to create a financial hardship for a student who's already academically struggling just compounds the problem. So we changed the consequence, we didn't change the standard. So consider that. I love this. Encouragement is oxygen to the soul. Don't be stingy with your compliments. For students, encourage them. They're working hard and need to know that you notice and that you care because it helps to build their efficacy. I know that I only have 5 more minutes of Claudia's worried. I'm watching the time. This is important that we get to how we build efficacy. Efficacy is different than confidence. Efficacy is task specific. Does a student believe they can do this thing that you're asking them to do? Whereas confidence is more like how they see themselves, a more general kind of impression. And we build efficacy through mastery experience, like having done it before. So if I am not sure if I can start an IV on this little tiny pediatric patient, if I've done it on an adult patient, that's similar. And as my coach in the hospital, if I'm working with a physician, I might remind them this is not dissimilar from when we were working on adults. This is just a little bit smaller. You can do this. The same is true in terms of speaking. If I were trying to coach somebody who was very nervous about public speaking, I would remind them this is just like in class, or this is just like when you spoke to the Boy Scouts. This is just like anything else that you've done. I would remind them of a time that they have done it before. You also gain efficacy through vicarious experience. That means watching somebody else do it who's like you. I'm using these images because in the fire service, we have a hard time recruiting minorities and women. And so by demonstrating, by using near peers, showing others who are like them, similar age, similar background, similar neighborhood, showing them this is how you do it. This is, you're welcome here. We want you here. There's a career for you here. We begin to show people that this is a welcoming and viable career option for you. So we start to have these pre-academies so that when people actually enter the fire academy, they're more likely to be successful, vicarious experience. So you want to use peer role modeling. Do you have students who've been successful in, like Maria's art class, if she had previous students come back and demonstrate their artwork or demonstrate maybe some of their early artwork and then what their artwork was at the end of her class, and other students who are feeling like, I can't draw anything, I'm terrible. Oh, I'm sorry, Maria teaches ESL. Cheryl teaches art. I messed that up already, sorry. But that would be an example of using a near peer, a vicarious experience, somebody who's like them. Social persuasion is another, and that's the home court advantage. That's people encouraging you, and that's why I said encourage often. It was Mark Twain who said, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. I love that. And it was the physical, how you feel physically also affects though your efficacy and how you're doing. And so there might be days when you feel like I got this, and other days, honestly, when your students log into Zoom, where you could just tell that they're like, not today. And that's okay. Sometimes you can use the collective efficacy, the sense of we're in this together, we're stronger together. And I encourage that by doing things that are sort of social in your class, having them rely on each other, these Tough Mudder events. I don't know if anybody does those, but you really have to rely on each other to do these crazy events. And if anybody doesn't do their part, they're not going to win. But in efficacy, whether people think they can or can't, they're going to be right. So it's very important that they no negative self-talk and they think that they can, they really think that they can do it. So this last piece is about the culture in the classroom and how it affects their learning, and really getting to the students why and sort of learning a little bit about themselves. You know, people only buy 2 things: solutions to problems and good feelings. We say that people don't buy drills, they buy holes. And they don't buy cars and boats, they buy transportation. And my favorite is that we don't buy cosmetics, we buy hope. I'm kidding, of course. But that it's how people are, what is it that they get? Why are they coming to us? Are they trying to complete a degree? Are they trying to get a better job? Are they trying to get a better life? What is it that they're trying to get out of your course or out of your class or coming to the college? And the culture you create in class is really important to their learning. So this is one of the things that we used to say, is that we would match energy with energy. If you want to be here late, somebody will stay late with you. You want to come on the weekend, I'll find somebody who will be here on the weekend with you. Often it was me. And that we wouldn't have let you into this program if we didn't think that you would be successful. We always took 42 students into each cohort, but if necessary, I would have only taken 39 if only 39 could be successful. That we would not, you wouldn't be here if we didn't believe you could be successful. And what we say as teachers is very, very important to student success. A difference of about 20% retention for underrepresented students. And that's huge. There aren't a lot of things that make that big of a difference. Students need to know that this classroom, whatever space we've created, is a trusted, safe space for them to do their best work. Because what's happening out there is producing a lot of cortisol, a lot of epinephrine, a lot of stress. And those things take up slots. They literally interrupt the learning process. They interrupt both encoding and retrieval of information. And so what it helps to sort of smooth that over is oxytocin. And oxytocin is built when we do things like hug, which I realize we can't do right now. But oxytocin is also released when people have a pet, when you say kind things, when they see images of other people hugging or expressing concern, when you have a conversation that says, how are you? What's happening for you? Are you okay? So my encouragement here is to get to know the students and create a space in your classroom where people feel like it's okay and they look forward to coming. Have conversations that share stuff about you, stuff about them, that those conversations, those relationships produce oxytocin, and that reverses the effects of the cortisol and the epinephrine. Emotions matter in learning. They interfere. Positive emotions are great, but negative emotions are devastating to any kind of performance, and especially those emotions that are like hopelessness and disappointment. Boredom and frustration are not great, but those ones that are negative and deactivating are the ones where we see students go away and they don't come back to our classes or to our colleges. And that's what's so, so really devastating to any kind of either performance or retention. So I know that my time is up, so I will stop. Good. Thank you, Jacqueline, that we just released some oxytocin. I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Claudia. I'll stop sharing. I hope that we've accomplished what I promised, which was inadvertently, if there was one or two things, maybe an organization of material or delivery, you were, maybe I got to stop doing that or adjust my resources a little bit, and maybe a couple of things that you could start doing, and then maybe a couple of things for our underrepresented students.
I really just want to turn it over to everybody here. This is amazing content. I am inspired to go through. See, I have it tabbed, so I'm going to be going through this and just checking things out. But I want to turn it over to everybody who is here to see if you have any questions, any comments. And then I've also put a link to the evaluation on the chat. If you can just take a couple minutes once we conclude to take that before you run out. But anybody have any questions, comments?
Heather, I thought you did a fabulous job. This just totally stimulated my brain. So everything you shared was excellent, excellent. And I think as instructors, I think it's good for us to be reminded of these things because we can get so used to our world caught up in what we're doing, where it's good for us to stop, reflect, and assess what we can do to help our students be motivated.
Great. Thank you so much for the feedback. I'm glad folks are leaving with like one or two things I can change tomorrow for my students.
Heather, thank
I don't
you.
see any other. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I coach physical education and coach basketball, and really enjoyed your presentation. Great energy, great information. A challenge I would have is maybe somebody like you can get on more boards of education, because the construct of education is not set up to succeed in the things you're talking about, in my opinion. And I've been a big advocate of this there needs to be a paradigm shift. It certainly isn't set up that way anymore. It's been going the wrong way at the junior college level to be able to achieve these results when there's a whole bunch of get them in and get them out as fast as possible is the model, and can't do all these things you're talking about in that kind of a model. So hopefully we can work to change some of these the structures and the processes that we're trying to put these students through, especially at the junior college level. But thank you very much. Really, really appreciate your presentation.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for presenting today. And I just want to remind everybody that Employee Learning Week concludes tomorrow. We hope that you are feeling inspired and you reflect on the good work that you do with our students and continue to engage with professional development throughout the year. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.